All right. So this is a little live Q&A. Going to give it just a few minutes here. Get everyone logged on. Okay. So this is my first time using this guy. So, hopefully this will work good. Can you guys hear me well? Just throw in the chat. Yeah. Okay, so what we'll do, let's keep the mics muted here, and then yeah, go ahead and just throw up questions up in the little chat box here, and then I will answer away. So it's just kind of open up live Q&A. Again, all things on here again are just for informational purposes only. This is just kind of all of us getting together talking about ideas, right? So this isn't any kind of official guidance or advice or meant to replace psychological services or counseling or medical services, any of that, right? This is just wanted to open up some time to do some Q&A. And so, obviously just based on the channel, it's going to be geared towards mental health, but with OCD and anxiety, but any and all questions are really welcome. And if I don't feel comfortable answering a certain question, then I won't. So, but anyways, that's well, thank you first to Gio. I'm glad that you found the book helpful, and yeah, thank you for purchasing it too. And so yeah, let's go ahead and just go ahead and submit any questions here in the chat, and then we will. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate that. Yeah, no, and if you found the podcast helpful, then yeah. So, Meg, if you sent me a oh, okay. Looks like we might have a bit of a conundrum here with the studio being full, which is that's okay. I didn't realize. I thought you could just come on the stream. Let me see 1 second here. Well, it's okay. We'll just answer some questions and we'll post up the replay. Okay, so let me go ahead and yeah. So Meg, if you could send me the other question, that would just send it in here. That would be helpful to me, just so I can yeah, make sure that I can see what it is. Okay, so let's go ahead and answer the first question. I had a question regarding how often you recommend doing ERP when symptoms are better. I see it as a daily practice, multiple times daily. Should I continue with that? And the AAA response, even if symptoms have notably improved. So yeah, I mean, like when it comes to ERP and doing compulsions, right? So what we are ERP is really the elimination of compulsions, right? And with that said, when you're thinking of ERP, you shouldn't think of it as a thing to get rid of symptoms, right? Getting rid of the symptoms that we often don't like the intrusive thoughts or the anxious sensations. We don't do ERP to get rid of those. We do it to get rid of behaviors. And once we get rid of behaviors, the loop breaks, right? So if the loop breaks, then what happens is we don't validate that the initial thought or the feelings are actually dangerous. And as a byproduct of that, generally our bodies and brains stop producing them. Because if you are doing safety behaviors, right, and you are constantly you're constantly engaging in those, in certain mental safety behaviors, in certain physical safety behaviors, you're validating the threat. You're validating that your nervous system really should be responding to this as a threat, right? So when that happens, right, when we engage in ERP, basically what we're doing is we're removing the behaviors that are validating the threat, therefore no longer treating it as a threat. So therefore our body stops responding to it like a threat, and generally our brain stop producing the intrusive thoughts. So even though you may have done ERP, and this is the tricky part. This is the really tricky part about ERP, in my opinion, is that most of the time we're entering this process with the intention of, hey, I want to get rid of thoughts and I want to get rid of feelings. Right? Like that's the pure intention. And that's actually not what we do. We get rid of the behaviors using ERP, using the AAA response, all of that. And so when, and the tricky part is that we do ERP and then we actually see a reduction in symptoms, and then we stop doing ERP. And then we start doing more compulsions, and then symptoms usually go back. That's why a lot of people with OCD and anxiety experiences tend to ebb and flow in and out of the loop, because they're constantly evaluating the symptoms they don't like as opposed to the safety behaviors that they're engaging in, and really seeing that as the thing we're attempting to change. So ERP shouldn't stop because you see a reduction in symptoms. I mean, you should consistently not engage in the safety behaviors. And that could be everything from avoidance, checking, reassurance, especially all the mental ones, the analyzing, the ruminating, trying to figure out, just being lost in your mind, actually, like thinking and analyzing. That's definitely a safety behavior as well. So, hope that's helpful. And, I guess what I would say is, that we really want to make sure that we're continuing doing ERP. I mean, to really answer the question, that's what I would advise you if I was, like working together. Obviously, this is all hypothetical, right? And always run it by your doctor and provider. But yeah, the idea of ERP is just behavioral focused, and so we want to continue that even when our symptoms tend to decrease. So don't look at it as a thing you're doing to get rid of symptoms. Look at it as the tool it's designed to be looked at, as you're getting rid of your behaviors and continuing to do that. So what gets you better generally keeps you better. So if ERP got you better, and that's such a loose terminology there, because it's still validating the idea that the idea is getting rid of thoughts and feelings. But if ERP really showed a big symptom reduction, then we want to continue to do it, right? So that's what I would say there. Okay, so moving to the next question. And yeah, so if your behaviors are mostly mental, just as a follow-up, then yeah, that's why we use the AAA response. Why I teach the AAA response so much. And so, because it's so important that we really eliminate those mental behaviors, and that's what it's designed to really help you do. So, okay, so let me move on to the next question, and then go ahead and just submit your question in the, let me see here, if we can add people to the stream, I guess. Okay. So yeah, just so you guys know, this is my first time using the StreamYard, so getting a strong feeling that I didn't do it correctly, because I thought that everyone would just be able to kind of tune into the stream. But for future, we will make some alterations on that one. So for those of you here, though, we'll open up a few more questions and do for the Q&A. So this is, I won't state names. I'll just read the question here. So question reads, I developed really bad anxiety almost a year ago after my father passed. I'm sorry to hear about your father passing. was really bad, and I was filled with self-doubt and fear. Fear is about getting anxious and having poor mental health. Okay. I've been doing really well, but always worried that it might quote unquote come back. I'm guessing you're talking about like mental health symptoms or mental illness symptoms. Um, so now that this 1 year anniversary of when I started to struggle, I'm filled with questions about how do I know I'm okay? How do I know I will be okay? Have I really changed? Now I'm feeling super anxious and scared. Okay. Um, yeah, great questions. Great questions. So, what I would say to that is when I'm just going to sit and think about it for a second, make sure I'm feeling in flow with the question. So number one, we getting worried about anxiety or feeling certain ways, whether it be depressed or having certain feelings and human experiences. The reality is those are normal human experiences. Anxiety and even feeling depressed in the right context is a normal human experience. If you have a significant loss, right, like you experience, it's normal to grieve. It's normal to feel sad, right? Those are normal human experiences like that. It's not, and so one of the things that I think most people are afraid of, and you kind of hinted into the question when it comes to like fearing symptoms, is really not trusting your ability to be able to handle it. Right. And the reality is you've handled it in the past, so you can handle it in the future. And once we have like so the self-doubt is really oftentimes our self-doubt and our ability to handle something, to handle emotions. And this is kind of what Hawkins talks about in the book Letting Go a lot, is we resist emotions because we are afraid of them. We're afraid of our ability to handle them. We're afraid of our, what we can, if we have the ability to handle them, what to do with them, all that. And when it comes to like fearing regressing in mental health, I would equate that very similarly to like fearing regressing in your physical health. Like that, the only way you're going to see a regression in your, like, so let's just flip the question around, and let's say you had you were really like physically unhealthy, let's say, right? Like your just weight wasn't where it was supposed to be. It's like all the, measurements and things they, were all over the place. And then you made a conscious effort to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to get physically healthy. So you started maintaining a certain diet, and then you started exercising, and you started maybe taking supplementation or, whatever it was. And over time, by engaging in that practice, you saw your physical health transform, right? So your body was exactly where it was supposed to be. You started feeling more energy, you were sleeping better, all that stuff. Now, if you came to me and you're like, well, Matt, I'm really afraid I might regress back into being physically unhealthy again. It's not like that just happens by you thinking that or having that fear in your mind, right? It happens. The only way that would happen is if you literally started, again, like engaging in all the behaviors you used to engage in that produce the result of you being physically unhealthy. So the same with mental health. Is like when I was really wrestling with my mental health, the reason I was wrestling with my mental health is because I was engaging in a bunch of terrible behaviors, right? Like all my rituals and compulsions and safety behaviors and all that stuff that produced the result of me being very mentally unhealthy. So when people ask me like, Matt, are you afraid of ever like regressing? And I say, it's not something that I worry about, and the reason being is because it's like, one, I know human emotions are a normal experience. So I don't see an emotion as a sign of an illness. In fact, my resistance to the emotion is what usually causes the issue. So when I, if I see myself like falling back into, trying to get rid of feelings and battling thoughts and doing unhealthy behaviors, then I have to like check myself and kind of go back and focus in on like, okay, what do I need to do here? And to really get myself healthy, right? That's kind of the whole point here. So with that said, like, I trust that by me doing what I know to do, that results will follow. They might not be there here today, especially if you're really in it, but I know that results come from a behavioral component here because of what I'm conditioning, what I'm reinforcing, and all of that. And so my ability to be with emotions and allow them to happen and all of that, really what we're doing with mental health recovery is we're not getting rid of physical symptoms. We're becoming big enough to be able to handle whatever's going on internally. So whether that be racing thoughts, whether that be emotions that are really uncomfortable, we're getting to a place of consciousness where we really can handle that. And that work of growth, you just become more and more confident in your ability to handle. So I understand you're feeling scared, but what I would say is that is kind of reframing this for yourself. It's not about like something coming back or fearing it, as much as making sure you're practicing the right stuff and continuing to practice it. So I hope that helps. Yeah, no, and so yeah, I totally. So this is a little follow up where said I'm afraid of. Oops, lost the thing. Okay, so I'm afraid because you got overwhelmed the first time. But the thing is just because you got overwhelmed the first time doesn't mean that that's going to happen if and when they pop up again. Because a lot of times the reason we get so overwhelmed, it's such a new experience that we get overwhelmed. But it's just like anything else. It's overwhelming to start a new job, right? Or to make a significant transition in your career. But once you do it, it's overwhelming to go through a significant breakup, right? Things like that, so, but once you go through something in life, it can never be as overwhelming as the first time you went through it, because it's like, it's like, you have the inner capacity to handle that, right? And you feel confident in it. Does that make sense? I hope that was helpful. So, okay. Next question here. What are your best tips to stop ruminating and analyzing about the past? It's a compulsion and I cannot seem to get past. Well, not to just shamelessly self-promote here, but the reason I wrote the book From Stuck to Unstuck, I think I have a link down in the notes for here, is for that reason, right? Because the thing that I fully believe most people do that keep them stuck in this loop is the mental behaviors. And telling someone not to do mental behaviors doesn't work very well. It's not a good intervention strategy, in my opinion. That's why in the book I talk very specifically about moving towards a solution. Now that solution for me was the AAA response, and that's what I teach to my clients. It's what the whole Taking Back Control program is essentially founded on, is really integrating that solution focused approach. So like, that's what I would tell you to do, because it's what I believe to be the best intervention. It is not, I wouldn't tell you to stop ruminating or stop analyzing, because that would, I equate that to me telling someone who's wrestling with alcoholism to stop drinking. It's like, to do that. I mean, even in your question, like, that you're supposed to stop ruminating, right? And stop analyzing. And so telling someone to stop an unhealthy behavior is rarely an effective intervention, and even at best may produce short-term results. And that's why, like, really integrating a solution-focused approach to the point where it becomes to the point where the person is doing it unconsciously, and that's just through repetition. That's when I've seen the best change happen there. So that's what I'd say for that. Okay, how do you deal with thought action fusion how do you deal with thought action fusion acts up out of nowhere? I imagine you continue to agree and allow with the thought, the feeling, to attack the thoughts as needed with ERP. I don't fully understand the question, because thought action fusion is a cognitive distortion, meaning it's not real, right? Thought action fusion is a belief that because we think something, that it's somehow fused with action. So if we think something, it's automatically going to happen. So a cognitive distortion acting up, meaning, my interpretation of the question is essentially that if I'm experiencing that cognitive distortion, what that is I'm underlying belief structure, right? So with and it's not your job to really get rid of thought action fusion or those kind of thoughts. It's more about addressing the underlying belief, if you will. So that is just a cognitive distortion. So yeah, obviously AAA response is part of that, but yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky question to answer, because I think I may just be understanding different, or I think there's a bridge in the communication that needs to be had where I understand what you're saying better. And so because when I understand thought action fusion, I'm talking about a cognitive distortion. So if a cognitive distortion comes up, that's just all that is. Like I don't, just the same way with, over catastrophizing. It's like when my mind's over catastrophizing something, this is cognitive distortion, right? So it's like, just because it comes up out of nowhere, I don't give it any more power than that. I just am able to identify that's what's going on. So hope that helps. Let's see. What do you suggest for a morning routine? I feel as though as soon as I wake up, the thoughts flood. I know obviously I'm not going to wake up and they'll go away one day. Well, I wouldn't necessarily hang on to that belief, because I think that will perpetuate things. But I'm trying to reframe my mind. Okay, brain, what do you have for me today? Which is good. Yeah, again, yeah, we want to be having an open, accepting attitude to our brains and our bodies, right? Like we don't want to be in conflict with them. So for morning routine, this is a tricky question because it's kind of loaded, but I'll answer it. It's just kind of, I don't want you to, so we got to remember that if we're doing things with the intention to make anxiety go away, we're not living from a place of acceptance, right? And so if the question is coming from a frame of mind or an intention of, hey, what morning routine can I do to not have these experiences? I would encourage you to kind of drop that and try and not trying to integrate a morning routine that's going to try to make something happen, right? Because I think it's just going to create more struggle in your life and more frustration, because I don't think there's going to be a morning routine that's going to necessarily produce the results that maybe you're looking for. That said, there's things that I do in the morning, and it really comes back down to trying to practice living from a higher level of consciousness. And one of the things is not getting on my phone right away. When I do this really well, I just leave the phone plugged in, right? Don't even touch it. Now, I don't always do that well, because I'm human, things happen, whatever. But that's the first thing, is not just getting into the kind of world of the internet and text messages and social media and all that stuff. So don't hop on your phone right away and start scrolling and getting on YouTube and all that, because that's just a distraction mechanism. So there, oftentimes in the morning, what I'll do is I'll start off with some breath work. And I'll also start off with some type of affirmation, right? Usually those would be the two things that I would start with. And reason is just kind of breathing and getting into my body, right? Some like intentional breathing. Um, and there's lots of different variations of this. You could do a 10 to 15 to even 20-minute meditation, right? To really kind of get you into like a state where you're really practicing being that awareness, practice being that witness to the mind. So I think that's a great way to start the morning if you can. Right now I'm in a stage in my life where, you know, and you can make the argument this is just an excuse, but my daughter, she seems to wake up at like just 6 a.m. on the dot, which is, and so usually I wake up to her waking me up. And then we kind of have our morning routine that we do of getting milk and, all that stuff. So I don't have just that kind of quiet space to start my morning off how I want to. Now, in theory, I could set an alarm even earlier and all that, but, so I usually have some routines that I do kind of once she is off for the day or once I have some alone time. Cold exposure is another great way to start the morning. And obviously you can learn more about like the Wim Hof method. That's some stuff that I have definitely implemented. But again, I don't do it with the intention of changing. I think this is the thing that I really want to stress here. I don't do this stuff with the intention of I'm going to change this and change this. I'm going to feel this way and feel this way. I do it with the pure intention of like, I want to care for myself. Right. And so, and this comes back down, I'm going to go ahead and read a quote here actually, because I was reading this yesterday and I sent it to my community. So to the person who asked, do I have support groups? Yeah. So, I mean, in Taking Back Control, right, we have our Plus community, right, where we have 2 Zoom groups a week, right? Just like kind of like this, but we're all on Zoom, and they roughly go between 90 to 120 minutes. And then we also have a whole private community as well, where I post up, audio threads and resources and all that stuff. If that's something you're interested in, you're welcome to fill out an application on the site. It's free. And then we would review it and reach out to you kind of with the next steps. And so if you just go to restoredminds.com/apply, you could complete that there. So this is one of the things that I think is so important is when we're making the conscious decision to take back control of our life, we have to make the decision to realize that there's 2 places we can live from in life, and it's fear and trust, right? And when you even say trust, you can interchange that with love, but it's so much of us, we're actually living from fear, right? We're fearing emotions, so we're going to implement a morning routine so that we don't have emotions, right? Like, and again, I'm totally making some assumptions with this question, but I think it brings in a large point here where a lot of things we try to do, we do them because we're living out of fear. Where when we do those same things, but we do it from a place of trust and love, it's a totally different result. So, so I'll read this right here because this is from the book Letting Go by Dr. Hawkins. So he says, we have an unconscious fantasy that fear is keeping us alive. This is because fear is associated with our whole set of survival mechanisms. We have the idea that if we let go of fear, our main defense mechanism, we would become vulnerable in some way. In reality, the truth is just the opposite. Fear is what blinds us to the real dangers in life. In fact, it's fear itself that's the greatest danger that the human body faces. It is fear and guilt that we bring that bring about disease and failure in every way in our lives. And this is really interesting because it goes back to, and I reference this in the book, when Roosevelt was talking in his speech, he said, the only thing to fear is fear itself, right? Just because when fear is running the show, we're often unconscious to it. We think we're being logical, but we're really living in fear. And he says we could do these same protective actions out of love rather than fear. Can we not take care of our bodies because we appreciate and value them rather than the fear of disease and dying? He goes on to say, I won't read it all, but the point to stress here is that when I do my morning routine, I do it because it's something that I'm doing to fuel my body and get myself into the right energetic state for the day, as opposed to I'm trying to change the uncomfortable emotions that I don't like, right? So, whether it's affirmations, kind of anchoring into certain truths that I'm going to try to live by for that day. When I do cold exposure, it's not to get rid of anything. It really is to like the practice of sitting with discomfort, to deep breathing, to really just, fill my body up with that oxygen. So I know it's a very long-winded answer. And, if you're part of the community, I know, I know sometimes I drop some definitely some long-winded answers. So, hope that helps though. And anyone that has any other questions here, by all means, go ahead and toss them up on the little chat group. And then I know I have another one here, and then I'll answer that. And then, yeah, go ahead and post up some questions. So let's see. So this question reads, when you say don't just stop mental safety behaviors like ruminating, analyzing, suppressing, I'm not clear what we should do instead. Right. So that's where the AAA response comes in, and, if you're not too familiar with that, I mean, a great place to get started is either the book, right, From Stuck to Unstuck. And I have a little link down in the notes where you can check that out. There's also the 2-day workshop. So that's a good introductory. And then if you really want, my help implementing that, or, more in depth, there's the 12-week Taking Back Control program, where not only talk about AAA response, but we also go into belief structuring, and everything that comes with it, really. So there's a lot and you can learn more about that at restoredminds.com. And then if you're interested, just, you can fill out a free application. My team and I can get back to you. And there's, for the person that asks how much, there's different variations. So there's a self-study, we have a group program, and then we have, kind of a hybrid as well as one-on-one. And let's see. So where was the question? Yeah. So what do you do instead? Yeah. The answer would be, what I would say is the AAA response. So the question, will I be posting this on the channel? So yeah, I mean, usually these get just kind of, I mean, this is live, right? So it's just kind of like one of the free ones. So yeah, usually we like to leave it up just for people that couldn't attend to benefit from the questions. And so that's generally what we would do with kind of the coaching and coffee thing. And it's just something that I'm just trying, because I was like, yeah, let's give it a try. And I wanted to see how people liked it. So any more questions? Just go ahead and submit them in. To contact me directly, so just go to restoredminds.com/apply. If you fill out an application, you'll essentially, kind of give me a little idea of what's going on, and you'll be able to give me your stuff, and I'll reach out, or my team will reach out, and we'll be able to kind of set up the next steps from there. It's the best way to do it. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say email me directly, just because we get a lot of emails, and with the application process, like, we have a very streamlined to make sure we're reaching out to people correctly and stuff. Let's see. So any other questions, go ahead and submit them. And if we're out of questions, no worries, we can wrap up for the day. I just wanted to, be able to come on here and try to answer some questions today. And then, but I have a feeling we have a few more. And so the one thing that I wanted to circle back to and just kind of stress a little bit was this idea of being in tune where we're operating from. Okay. And I'll circle that, and then we have some good questions here. So remember, when we are in fear, we're operating from the sympathetic nervous system, right? So we're operating from a survival mechanism. And when we're operating from the parasympathetic, or like, so think of your nervous system like a big upside down stoplight, right? You have green, and the energy is kind of directed into your face to social engagement. Yellow is your energy is kind of activated in the chest, and red is kind of more in your stomach or diaphragm, like, down in your gut area. And that's how your system is essentially responding to, the perception of whether something's a threat or not. So when we are, operating from fear and trying to get rid of our emotions, what we really want to do is really bring a sense of safety to feeling however we feel, right? This is the paradox about anxiety, OCD and anxiety recovery, is that it's actually not about getting rid of the feelings or the thoughts. Now, that does happen indirectly, but that happens when we actually have a safety of or feel comfortable feeling uncomfortable. And so being in tune with what energy you're doing something from, am I doing this from a place of fear, or am I doing it from a place of love and trust, is a huge part of recovery, right? So that's why it's not necessarily about, yes, it is about what you're doing, but it's also kind of like the energy you're bringing into that. If you're doing ERP just to try to get rid of thoughts and feelings, it's going to backfire because, initially you're going to experience them, right? And then you're going to think ERP isn't working. ERP is about getting rid of the behaviors that are fueling the loop. So what do you do if you're afraid to reach out for help? The fear is part of the OCD. That's a good question. So first I would ask, okay, like what's the fear underneath that, right? Like, as afraid to reach out for help, I mean, that's just literally sending in an application, right? Just like literally all you have to do. I think underneath that probably is the fear of being judged. Then oftentimes there's a weird like fear of getting better. And I know this sounds weird, but I believe it's very real phenomenon. Sometimes we've lived in OCD and anxiety, or like a struggle for so long that like it's kind of scary. Like, I mean, look, let's be real. Like anything that's different is scary. So if we know anxiety, there's a certain safety we feel in it because it's familiar. So getting better can actually kind of feel scary. And even when you start feeling better, it can be scary, right? Like, and so I guess once you come to the realization that no matter what you do, fear is going to be part of this, right? So you kind of have to like look at both sides of the coin. You got to go, okay, so I'm afraid of reaching out for help because I'm afraid of being judged, or I'm afraid this might happen. I'm afraid I might try and fail. I'm afraid that, this guy Matt is just some Looney Tune on the internet. Okay, cool, all that, right? But then the other question you'd have to ask yourself on the flip side of that is, okay, like what's my life going to look like 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 6 years from now, if I don't do something? Has what I've been doing been working, right? Has this been working? Am I getting results doing what I'm doing? And if not, then it stands to reason that if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to keep getting the same results. And if I don't like where I am right now, and if I keep doing what I'm doing, then I'm certainly not going to like where I am in 6 months from now, a year from now, 10 years from now. And it's like, me having the vantage point I have, where I've gotten a chance to talk to people from all walks of life, whether it's someone who symptoms onset, like 6 weeks ago, and they find this, find restored minds or whatever, they start getting help somewhere, that's great. But there's also people that, the average time usually before someone really gets help is about 7 years, I think. And I've talked to people that have struggled for decades. I mean, literally decades, like in their 60s, in their 70s, just getting help because they just didn't even know. They were too afraid to seek out help. They were too afraid to tell people what was going on. And, the real tragedy of living with OCD and anxiety from my perspective is all the time you lose, because you know, in almost every case, you're often worrying about something that usually is never going to happen, right? And you know, I made a podcast about this recently, where you know the guy was trying to protect his farm, right, from I don't even know if we've released it yet, actually, but he's trying to protect his farm, and he builds his defense and he builds his defense and he digs his moats around his farm and he puts up his spikes and puts up his spikes, and he just spends day after day after day doing it and doing it and doing it. And he believes that because he keeps putting up these defenses, no one gets to his farm. Only to realize on his deathbed, after many decades of doing this, that no one was ever going to come in the first place, right? And being able to look back on an event like that, it's like all that energy I put into it was for nothing. And that's how I can see my own experience with this, in how much time I lost, the opportunities that I lost. Right? And I can speak into them very clearly. I mean, like my big you know, onset and experience with OCD and anxiety, like, was my freshman year in college. So like my entire college career, you know, was just I was very mentally ill. You know, I'll just to be transparent. There's no other way to say it. I was really wrestling with my mental health, and so, which prevented me from forming relationships with people, having friendships, going and doing things. You know, because I would spend a lot of my time, you know, just doing compulsions at school, outside of school. You know, like that's just what I would do. So, you know, when we talk about afraid of reaching out for help, there's fear on both ends of this coin. There's the fear of reaching out for help, and it's okay to feel that. It's very valid to feel that. There's all sorts of reasons why people feel afraid to reach out for help. But then there's also the fear of not, like, there should be a greater fear of not getting help. And that's how it was for me. Like, eventually it got to the point for me where I was like, I can't continue living like this. So the fear of reaching out for help and all the fears associated with that, just that it was a greater fear of me continuing to live like this, or like I was living, I should say. So I don't know if that helps, but you know, it's just something to kind of think about there, you know. So question, what is pure O? Is that like intrusive thoughts with multiple themes? And then the next question is, can people with pure O have just one theme or that they are stuck with? Okay. So pure OCD is a myth. So it's an illusion, doesn't exist. Okay. It's just language that people came up with to try to explain a certain subcategory of this experience. So what pure OCD was thought to be at one time was this idea of people would have, it was purely obsessional OCD, and the obsession is the intrusive thought or the what if. So the idea of this person purely has thoughts, they don't have any compulsions. Now the problem is, with the diagnosis of OCD, you have to have both obsessions and compulsions. So this was thought at one point in a galaxy far away, a long time ago, that this was untreatable because they didn't have compulsions. So that was where the whole pure OCD kind of language came from. Now, what we've since found out and since discovered is 100%, in every case I've ever seen, there is no such thing as pure OCD, because the person is always engaging in some kind of compulsions or safety behaviors. They're just often mental, right? So they're engaging in mental behaviors, so that the people may not actually see them. Like, I had a whole bunch of mental behaviors, right? This could be anything from ruminating, analyzing, thought checking, thought suppressing, thought replacement, mental praying, you know, obviously rumination. I don't know if I said that, but, you know, again, internal body scanning, body checking, you know, checking for somatic sensations, right? All these things that you can do inside yourself. So now generally the themes that kind of come with, quote, pure OCD tend to fall under the categories of intrusive thoughts related to harm, intrusive thoughts related to sex, and intrusive thoughts related to God, or existential ideas. And this can kind of take on various different categories. So, you know, so let's see here. We got, so that's what pure O is, and it can be with multiple themes. Can people with pure O just have one theme, or that they are stuck with? Generally, what will happen is someone will have a theme that, I mean, I've seen it both ways. I've seen people have every single kind of theme under the umbrella, and then sometimes people just have like literally one thing that they get stuck on, and both can be equally debilitating if not addressed. So a lot of times someone will have like one theme that just kind of plagues them, and they keep doing compulsions around. So and then they can also have several others, and then oftentimes they can get better, like I said, and because they keep engaging in mental behaviors, like a new theme will morph into it and will surface up. This is why a lot of people are afraid of coming to group, is because they're afraid they might hear something that then they might get stuck on. To that, I would say it's the best thing you could ever do, because you're essentially getting ahead of the OCD and the fear, right? Like you're like, it's almost like there's a fisherman and he has all these tackle boxes, and you get to look behind and actually see all the different lures that the OCD can try. So you're ready for it if it does. So, hopefully that makes sense there. Let's see. Okay. So I'm just learning this whole, StreamYard thing, by the way. So I know I can add certain people to the stream. I know people can zoom in as well. So, yeah, I don't, I'm just kind of figuring it out. So give me a few times with this, and then we'll have it dialed in here soon. Okay, so here's a question. What do you think about medication and ERP? And then hello to Gigi. So medication is out of my scope, meaning I can't offer any kind of guidance on it. I don't prescribe it. I don't take it. So I can offer you just thoughts about what I have seen in research articles, right? And I try to stay pretty up to date on it. So, trying to kind of think about how deep I want to go into this question. The first thing I would say about everything is go consult with your doctor, go consult with your psychiatrist, and I would actually consult with like 3 or 4 people. I would take the time to do that, and the investment of doing this, right? Because for some reason, it's like, we never want to just outsource just to one person, right? It's like that gives the person too much power and influence over our lives. We want to take as much information we can and make the best decision we can, and we also want to pay attention intuitively to ourselves to say, hey, look, like what feels right for me. Some people that is taking medication. Some people it's not. And I am never one to try to tell someone like, hey, this is what you have to do, quote unquote. Right. Because because if you're going in with the idea of like, I have to do something, it's just not, you're not using intuition at that point. So I think one of the strongest thing that we can bring into this is intuition. When it comes to meds, there is research that suggests that SSRIs can be helpful. That said, there's also like articles that seem to suggest that some of the best benefit SSRI brings is placebo, right? And even then, that still makes them effective. But the issue is that in any case, I still stand behind the idea that medication at its very, very best optimal is something that will assist you on your journey. And, even then, it's like if you're walking up a big mountain, it's like medication could be equated to like a hiking stick, right? You still have to walk up the mountain. It might just be something that kind of you can use as an assistance. And walking up the mountain in this metaphor is obviously doing the actual work of ERP and using the AAA response, all that stuff. So that's what I would say. And again, like I would get multiple opinions, and then I would look at, who you most align with and trust the guidance of that person. And obviously I will say I'm pretty adamant that I'm not a big believer in things like the benzodiazepines. So the Xanax, Klonopins, all that stuff, because, they're addictive. They serve to help you today, but they don't help you tomorrow, right? So they're a very short-term based solution. Now, if you take them for a short period of time, okay, like that's your decision. But they're also like one of two medications that if you stop taking, right, they can have very, very serious negative effects. So it's kind of one of those things that like I'm really about learning or empowering the individual from a behavioral capacity to get big enough to be able to handle emotions in their body. Hope that makes sense there. Okay, let's go ahead and take a few more questions, then we'll tie it up for today. This has been kind of fun, by the way. I've enjoyed this, so I may start doing this once a month or something, just as a fun thing, because it's cool to hang out here and connect with everyone. Okay, so what can I start now to get moving forward with having thoughts against God? I've lost sleep. I've fasted. I'm exhausted. Tried everything I know. Just need something moving forward to get me moving forward. So obviously I don't have a ton of information to work with this question, in the sense of like, there's a lot of things that I would like to ask you. That said, when we're talking about the intrusive thoughts against God, that is pretty straightforward when it comes to scrupulosity, and the pure OCD when it comes to like, what you would call scrupulosity, kind of when OCD and anxiety kind of attack one's religious faith. So, and then, when you are in the stressed out state, constantly in that sympathetic, it's going to impact your sleep. It's just sleep and the fight or flight response don't go well together. Right. And that's why what we need to do is really get your system back into the parasympathetic where it feels safe. So it feels safe enough to sleep. So it's not really about trying to make yourself sleep or anything like that. It's like, we really want to get your body to the place where it really believes, your nervous system, where it really believes and understands that you're safe. The first thing that I would say, and again, I've worked with a lot of people with scrupulosity, and again, I myself wrestle with scrupulosity for a long period of time. The thing I would say about scrupulosity is it comes back down to the initial question that I was saying is, am I operating from fear or am I operating from love, right? And trust. And if we have a fearful relationship with God and essentially no matter what particular faith you are, most of the major world religions that I know of, and so being from a more Judeo-Christian background, right, of like the Bible, right, in the West, but even in Islam, right, it's like when you're talking about God, generally the universal consensus is God is a God of love, not a God of hate and condemnation. And what happens is I think that scrupulosity stems from a false perception about God, and therefore that causes us to develop a fearful relationship with God. And what that does is it causes us to engage in behaviors in an attempt to control God. And just by breaking that down, hopefully you can see, one, that we don't have the ability to control God, right? And our relationship with God should be more out of trust and love than it should be out of fear. And then the thoughts that sprout out of the fear of, whether it's a intrusive thought about God, of, whatever, could be anything. Right? I mean, I've seen the whole gamut of thoughts pop up for people. The bigger question with scrupulosity is, how can I move? What would it look like if I had a trusting relationship with God? Because I think the thing that helped me understand God better than anything was becoming a parent. Because and oftentimes, at least in the Bible, in more of a Christian-based Western perspective, God is referred to as Father, right? Even from Jesus, right? And so when you think about Father, and having become a father myself, I look at how my relationship with my daughter, right? And it's like, I ask myself, like, would I want my daughter to have a fear-based relationship with me? And, the answer is obviously no. Like, I want her to understand this idea of unconditional love. I want her to understand this idea of, like, just like, yeah, just pure unconditional love. Now that doesn't mean that when she does things that she's not supposed to do, that there's not like corrective action. When she draws all over the wall, that I'm like, hey, we can't do that. It's like, we don't do that. Right. But the general, like, the basis foundation of the entire relationship is love and trust. And then that helped me to understand, well, if I can accomplish that as a flawed, sinful, effed up human that I am, like, if there's a perfect deity and omnipotent, I'm not going to be able to say those words, all knowing, all powerful, all present God, right? Like, and if that, like, if I can try to even aim for that, like, just how much bigger that must be, from God's perspective towards me as a quote, child of God or creation of God. So, the real thing with scrupulosity is actually shifting our whole fundamental viewpoint of our relationship of God, in my opinion. And I hope that's helpful. And, obviously we talk a lot about this in our community, and I'm actually looking to put a workshop together, or a more specific training just on scrupulosity, because I know it impacts a lot of people. So, but yeah, hope that was helpful. And so, like, when it comes to moving forward, I mean, the thing I would say is I would encourage you to get guidance, right? And I mean, if you're interested in the possibility of working together, I mean, go fill out an application. You know what I mean? It's free, and we can at least see if it's a good next step. Because what you need to really make sure you're doing is not continuing to do what you're doing that's keeping you stuck. Oh wow. Got a couple more questions here. All right, I'm going to answer 3 questions, and then we'll tie it up. So, let me see this. I'm still operating from a place of fear, so that I'm a person who is uncomfortable with being comfortable. When I get comfortable myself. Okay, so yeah, so this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, was the idea of when you start to get into green, it feels abnormal because you're so used to living in anxiety that you start to, again, feel better, and it becomes almost like you become almost afraid of feeling good, right? Totally a normal part of the experience. And yeah, what we want to do is still sit with that feeling, right? And actually, again, allow that feeling to be there, not trying to change that. And what we actually want to do is become comfortable being uncomfortable, just comfortable feeling however we're feeling, not trying to make it so we have to feel a certain way. How do we resolve OCD with the fear of getting in trouble? It doesn't. So with the idea of, like, it doesn't really matter what that OCD is called, quote unquote. I wouldn't go that route. Same kind of thing. It's really like looking underneath it, kind of understanding what the core fear is what I would say there. How do you respond when someone with OCD says, I don't feel good and nothing works. You know, like the reality is you have a nervous system and you have a brain, and it works the same as, you know, for anyone on this journey, in my opinion, right? So the idea that nothing works, uh, what I would say to that is potential the deflection that's happening, right? As you're looking for a thing that's going to give you a certain result, as opposed to realizing you're the solution. Like you're the one that's responsible for healing yourself, right? And if nothing is working, it comes back down to first understanding the problem correctly. Because if you don't understand the problem correctly, then oftentimes you're going to try to solve the wrong problem and therefore not get results. So that's where it comes into the idea of, I mean, you know, like I use the example all the time of, okay, like if I have, you know, say I walk out of my backyard and it's full of mud, and my initial perception is that I have a big mud problem. But the mud is caused because up the hill, there's a broken pipe at the neighbor's house and the water's just leaking into my backyard and causing mud to form. Well, yeah, in theory, on the surface, I have a mud problem. What I actually have is a water problem up there, right? And, you know, so if I focus on the mud problem and I'm trying to dig all the mud out and put sand down, and then the water's just spilling in, like I'm solving the wrong problem. That's why, you know, understanding the problem correctly, understanding it as a loop, not a thought and feeling problem, is really the first step. And that's a lot of what I talk about in my book, From Stuck to Unstuck. And I have a link down in the notes where you could check that out. And, but yeah, that's what I would say it's not that nothing works. It's probably just that you haven't received the proper psychoeducation first. And that proper psychoeducation, I think, will put you on a much better path and trajectory. So, and I think the book is a great place to get started there. Again, it's $6 for the book and audiobook. And yeah, you know, and so that's what I would start with. I think that will really help you recontextualize the problem. And thank you, Jackie, for the comments about the YouTube video. That's amazing. Keep that up. So, all right. Well, I think I'm going to tie up for today. I appreciate you guys, coming to hang out, and and then we'll probably post this up, and then I'll see you guys in next time we do this. All right. Talk to you soon.